Hi there, this is Autumn from Renner International again, and I would like to share with you another tip building off of a previous tip I had given before about what you teach when you're teaching vocabulary. But today we're going to talk about what you teach when you're teaching grammar. It's the same kind of principle, but it's a little bit more complicated because grammar is a full sentence and vocabulary is just one word. So let's take a look. Just like before, we have our form, use, meaning, and pronunciation. So first, let's talk about form. When you teach the form of grammar, I always think about it as kind of the rules. When people think about grammar, they think about all of these rules, base form, infinitive, all of that stuff, and that's pretty much form. So I always tell people to imagine what is your formula. For example, if you think about should have or shouldn't have, this would be my formula. I usually put it within a sample sentence so that my students aren't just seeing an empty skeleton, they're seeing it in a real context. And I underline and highlight and make little notes about all of the important parts of form, the mistakes that you'd make while writing, which then would happen while you're speaking. So for example, it doesn't matter what the subject is, should doesn't change, have after should also doesn't change, it's always have, here's the contraction form, and then after have, I have to use the third form, the past participle. So that's my basic formula for this grammar. Then moving over to use, this one can be a little bit tricky. When I think about the use of my grammar, I often try and figure out why I'm speaking. What is the subtext? What am I trying to communicate? You can also think about functional language like giving advice or, I don't know, expressing your opinion, that kind of stuff. So if you're thinking, this grammar kind of has two different uses. It depends on the subject. So I shouldn't have called him. I'm communicating my regret to you. That's why I'm speaking to you. So that's the use. But if I have you shouldn't have called him. I'm not communicating regret there. I'm giving you advice about a past situation. So you can have two different uses here depending on why you're speaking the subtext, what you're communicating. So that is the use of grammar. Now, it can be a little bit confusing separating the meaning from the use, and with some grammar, they're kind of inseparable. But here we have two distinct things. So typically the meaning is often connected to the tense and the action. What kind of action is it? Is it completed? Is it uncompleted? What kind of time is it? Is it a specific time, a general time? That's often connected to the meaning. There are more elements, but that's just the basic stuff. So with our I shouldn't have called him sentence, it means that it happened in the past. It also means that it was a bad idea, and then that is connected to why am I speaking? Because I regret this. So the relationship between use and meaning, it's very connected and it can be difficult to distinguish between them, but I often think of as meaning, time, action, those little specific things, and I think about use as the subtext, the function, the context, all of that stuff. And then lastly, we have pronunciation. So when I teach pronunciation for grammar, I typically don't focus on sounds because I want to build the students' listening comprehension at the same time as I'm building their pronunciation. So I teach the chunk. How does it sound in a full sentence? So not only are they practicing speaking in full sentences, but it starts getting their ear accustomed to what it sounds like if a native speaker says it in a full sentence. So for example, I shouldn't have called him, or I shouldn't have called him. I often like to use this little wave graph because these little things here above the line are what the students are going to hear, but below the line, that's all the unstressed stuff, so they often don't hear it. If they can visualize this, it often helps them not only improve their listening comprehension, but understand how different sounds are stressed because they're more important in a sentence. So those are the basics. A little bit more complicated than vocabulary, but if you can manage to teach all of these four aspects, you will really help your students build their grammar fluency and accuracy.